Snow drifts softly outside a small house in Silverbrook. Inside, a little girl named Lily Coleman, only 7 years old, stands on tiptoe, icing her very first birthday cake. Her tiny hands tremble, not from the cold, but from hope. She whispers to herself, "Daddy's coming home today." But instead of laughter, a harsh voice cuts through the quiet, her stepmother, Clara, shouting, furious. The cake crashes to the floor, frosting and tears mix on the tiles. And at that moment, through the doorway, her father, Officer Ethan Coleman, steps in, still in uniform, his loyal German shepherd at his side. He freezes, watching the scene unfold, unable to believe what he's seeing. What happens next will change all of their lives forever. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments below. And may your day be filled with kindness, light, and peace. The first snow of December fell over Silverbrook, a quiet town nestled between the pine ridges of northern Oregon. The morning had begun in silence, wrapped in a pale mist that blurred the outline of rooftops and telephone poles. By late afternoon, snowflakes spun through the golden light like drifting feathers, blanketing the narrow streets where the world seemed to breathe slower, softer. In a small two-story house at the end of Maple Drive, warm light spilled from the kitchen window. The scent of vanilla, sugar, and melted butter drifted through the air, mingling with the crisp smell of frost outside. Inside, Lily Coleman, a 7-year-old girl with ash-blonde hair tied into uneven pigtails, stood on a wooden stool. Her cheeks were flushed from the heat of the oven, her small hands dusted with flour, as she carefully spread pink frosting over a small cake. Lily had the kind of face that looked perpetually hopeful, with big gray-blue eyes that reflected every light around her. Her laughter, though quiet, often carried through the house like the sound of wind chimes. But lately, she hadn't laughed much. She wore a pale yellow sweater with sleeves too long, and she kept glancing toward the old wall clock above the counter. 5 o'clock, she whispered. Dad should be home soon. Her voice trembled with excitement and longing. She had been counting the days, 47 of them, since her father's last call from his assignment in Seattle. Every night, she marked a red X on her calendar. Tonight, on her 7th birthday, she had saved the biggest X of all. "Don't make a mess, Lily," a sharp voice cut through the room. Clara Coleman, Lily's stepmother, stood by the doorway, arms folded across her chest. She was in her early 30s, tall and slender, with dark auburn hair always tied in a perfect twist. Her beauty was the kind that intimidated rather than comforted. Sculpted cheekbones, cold hazel eyes, a kind of stillness that made people think twice before speaking. She had once been a real estate agent in Portland, confident and charming, but the failure of a major deal had cost her reputation and her confidence. Since marrying Ethan, she carried that bitterness beneath her polished smile, as if the world owed her something, and Lily's innocent joy was a debt unpaid. "I'm almost done," Lily said, clutching the spatula. "Dad likes strawberry frosting." Clara's lips twitched. "Your father doesn't like sweets, and you're getting frosting all over the counter. I told you I'd order something proper, not this—" She gestured with disdain. "Childish mess." Lily's shoulders drooped, but she didn't answer. She simply focused on the candle she was trying to fix at the center of the cake, the number 7 slightly tilted. "I just wanted to make it myself," she murmured. Clara sighed theatrically. "You always just want. You wanted to paint the walls. You wanted to keep that stray dog. You wanted your father to stay home. Maybe someday you'll learn the world doesn't work on want, little girl." Lily bit her lip and looked toward the frosted window. Beyond the glass, snowflakes drifted down like small, cold wishes. Outside, something moved near the fence. A dark shape padded through the snow. Shadow, a 5-year-old German shepherd, strong and broad-chested, his fur a rich blend of sable and silver. His amber eyes gleamed with quiet intelligence. Shadow had served with Ethan Coleman, Lily's father, in the Silverbrook Police K-9 unit for years. After Ethan was injured during a chase 2 winters ago, both were retired from field duty, though Ethan remained the department's deputy chief. The dog had been restless since Ethan left for his temporary assignment. Every evening, Shadow circled the gate at the same hour, waiting for the sound of a familiar patrol car that never came. Lily spotted him through the window and smiled faintly. "Shadow's back," she whispered. She wiped her hands and hurried to the back door, but Clara's voice stopped her mid-step. "Leave the dog alone. He drags dirt into the house, and I don't want his hair everywhere." "He's cold," Lily protested softly. "He's an animal. He'll survive." Clara turned away, reaching for her glass of white wine. Lily hesitated, torn between obedience and compassion. She opened the door just enough to toss out a small blanket she had hidden under the table. Shadow caught her scent immediately and wagged his tail, a soft sound escaping his throat, a low, thankful whine that melted into the falling snow. "Happy birthday, Shadow," she whispered before closing the door. The clock ticked toward evening. The house grew dim, except for the flickering light of the small kitchen lamp. Clara was upstairs, talking on her phone in a hushed, impatient tone. Lily could only hear fragments. "Yes, I transferred it today. He won't know." She didn't understand the words, but felt a strange chill in her stomach. She lit the candle, hands trembling slightly. "Dad will come," she whispered again. "He promised." Outside, the wind picked up, blowing hard against the windows. The garden lights flickered, then dimmed, and the room filled with the faint hum of the heater. Lily stood there, small and patient, watching the clock's hands move too slowly. When the sound of tires crunching on the snow finally came, her heart leapt. Headlights washed over the front yard. A black police SUV stopped by the gate. Lily's face lit up as she ran toward the door, but Clara's footsteps thundered down the stairs. "What do you think you're doing?" "Dad's home," Lily cried. Clara's expression shifted, a flicker of panic, quickly replaced by cold irritation. "He's early," she muttered under her breath. "Of course." The car door slammed. Footsteps approached. The gate creaked open. Lily turned, clutching her small cake with both hands, ready to show him, but Clara reached her first. "Wait," she hissed. "You made this mess without my permission. Now you'll clean it up." You never listen." Clara's hand shot out, slapping the side of the cake. It slipped from Lily's hands, tumbling onto the snowy porch. The candle broke in half, the frosting splattering across the ground like spilled paint. For a second, no one moved. Then Lily's small voice broke the silence. "I just wanted to wait for Dad to get back." That was when Ethan Coleman appeared at the gate. He was in his late 30s, broad-shouldered with a calm yet rugged demeanor, the kind of man whose silence spoke more than his words. His once black hair was touched with gray at the temples, his face tanned and lined from years in the field. His eyes, steel blue, carried both authority and warmth, though lately the warmth had dimmed under fatigue. He had spent 2 months in Seattle leading a task force on trafficking, and the absence had hollowed something inside him. In his hand, he held a white bakery box tied with a silver ribbon. The sight before him froze him in place. His daughter standing barefoot on the porch, the cake ruined, Clara's foot pressing down on the frosting. The suitcase slipped from his grip, thudding onto the driveway. His voice, when it came, was hoarse. "Clara, what are you doing?" Clara blinked, startled but quick to recover. "Ethan, you're home early. She dropped the cake, and I told her to be careful, but she threw a tantrum. "I didn't," Lily cried, tears streaking her cheeks. Shadow barked from the fence, sharp and loud, his ears pricked, eyes darting between them. Ethan's jaw clenched. He looked from the crushed cake to Clara's wine-stained hand. "You stomped on it," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. Clara's face tightened. "You're misunderstanding." But Ethan didn't respond. He stepped forward, picked up the broken candle from the snow, and brushed off the frosting. His hands trembled slightly. For a moment, he looked older than his years. "Go inside, Lily," he said softly. She obeyed, her small shoulders shaking. Shadow followed her to the door, nudging her leg with his nose. Clara folded her arms. "Ethan, we can't let her grow up spoiled." He raised a hand. "Enough." The word carried more weight than anger. It was exhaustion, disappointment, and something deeper. Grief. Clara looked at him as if trying to measure how far she could still push. But the look in his eyes told her this time she shouldn't. She turned sharply and walked back into the house, heels clicking against the tiles. Ethan stood there alone for a long time, snow gathering on his shoulders. The night had grown darker. the town lights distant and blurred. Finally, he bent down, picked up what remained of the little cake, and set it gently on the porch railing. The candle flickered once before the wind snuffed it out. Behind him, Shadow padded forward, pressing his head against Ethan's knee. The man placed a hand on the dog's neck, his breath visible in the cold. "We're home, boy," he whispered, though the words felt hollow. Inside, Lily sat at the window clutching her torn teddy bear, watching her father's shadow through the frosted glass. The light from the kitchen cast long shapes on the snow. 3 figures, one weary man, one loyal dog, and one small, broken cake between them. The wind howled softly through Silverbrook that night, carrying with it the faintest echo of a child's wish, one that had not been heard yet, but soon would be. Morning came pale and brittle over Silverbrook, the kind of morning where light broke through a thin mist and turned everything to muted silver. Snow still clung to the eaves and fences, and the quiet felt so deep that even the crows refused to cry. Inside the Coleman house, the silence was uneasy, thick, like breath held too long. The scent of stale wine hung in the kitchen, mixing with the faint sweetness of crushed frosting still staining the porch outside. Ethan Coleman sat at the table, still in his uniform pants and undershirt, his service jacket draped over a chair. The strong lines of his face were softened by exhaustion. He hadn't slept, hadn't even tried. His eyes, those cold, steady eyes honed by years on the force, kept drifting to the small pink stain on the sleeve of his shirt. Frosting. Lily's cake. He rubbed it once, then stopped, his hand trembling. Across the room, Clara moved about with rehearsed grace. She wore a beige robe that made her look delicate and harmless. Her auburn hair cascaded in lazy waves, framing a face too calm for someone who'd shattered a child's joy the night before. "You didn't come to bed," she said lightly, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "You were upset, I understand." Ethan didn't look at her. "Upset? That's one word for it." She sighed, setting a mug before him. "Ethan, I told you. She dropped the cake. I might have overreacted, but you know how she gets. Always testing limits. You coddle her too much." He finally looked up. His gaze was steady, cold. "She's 7. For a moment, Clara's mask cracked, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before she smiled again. "And I'm trying to teach her responsibility. You think the world will go easy on her just because she's your daughter?" Ethan's jaw tensed. He didn't answer. He had spent a lifetime reading people, suspects, victims, liars, but reading his own wife had become impossible. She had a way of turning guilt into reason, cruelty into care. From the hallway came a sound, a faint creak, then the soft thud of small feet. Lily appeared at the doorway, her hair uncombed, wearing a faded blue nightdress. She hesitated when she saw Clara, clutching her old teddy bear by one arm. Ethan's voice softened immediately. "Hey, sweetheart." Lily's eyes, still red from crying, brightened a little. She stepped closer. "Morning, Daddy." Clara turned away, pretending to clean the counter. Ethan reached out, brushing Lily's hair from her face. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Shadow slept by the door. He kept me warm." Ethan smiled faintly, but the ache in his chest deepened. "He's a good boy." At that moment, Shadow padded in from the hallway, his coat shining faintly in the morning light. He sat beside Lily, head high, tail sweeping once across the floor. Clara frowned. "He shouldn't be inside. He's shedding everywhere." "He's fine," Ethan said, voice flat. There was a sharp silence. Clara took a sip of coffee and glanced at the clock. "You'll be late for your meeting at the precinct." "I called in, took the day off." Her hand froze midair. "The day off?" "Yeah," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Figured I'd spend it where I should have been last night." He looked at Lily. "With my girl." Lily's face broke into a smile so bright that it made the air lighter. For a moment, even the house seemed to thaw. Clara forced a laugh, but her eyes hardened. "Well, that's nice, but you should have warned me. I plan to visit the mortgage office today." "Go ahead," Ethan replied. "We'll manage here." She set the cup down with more force than necessary, the porcelain clinking against the counter. "Fine, I'll be back by afternoon." She turned to Lily, her voice suddenly sweet but sharp beneath the surface. "Be a good girl for your father, okay?" Lily nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." When the door closed behind Clara, the air in the house changed. It was like a window had been opened after a long storm. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Come here, kiddo," he said, patting his knee. Lily climbed up, curling against him like she used to when she was smaller. "You know I'm sorry, right? For not being here?" She looked up. "You're here now?" He smiled, pressing his forehead to hers. "Yeah, I am." They spent the morning together. Ethan made pancakes, bad ones, burned around the edges. But Lily ate them anyway, grinning. Shadow lay under the table, occasionally nudging Ethan's boot as if approving. By noon, the snow outside began to melt. The sky had turned a pale blue, and sunlight streamed across the living room floor. Ethan decided to take Lily and Shadow for a walk down to Maple Park, a small green square in the center of town. The park was mostly empty except for Mr. Graham, an old widower who fed the pigeons every day at noon. He was thin, stooped, with a long gray beard and a wool cap that looked older than he was. "Well, if it isn't Officer Coleman," he greeted with a crooked grin. "Thought the city swallowed you whole." Ethan chuckled, shaking the man's hand. "Almost did. How's life treating you, Graham?" "Same as always, too quiet and too long." The old man's eyes softened when he saw Lily. "And who's this young lady? She's gotten taller." "This is Lily," Ethan said proudly. "You remember her from the summer fair." Graham nodded, offering her a handful of birdseed. "You ever feed pigeons, kiddo?" Lily giggled, cupping the seeds carefully. "They're so soft-looking." Shadow watched closely, tail flicking in alert curiosity, though he never moved without Ethan's quiet nod. He was trained to protect, but also to understand gentleness, a trait Ethan admired in him. For a while, everything felt almost normal. The town around them seemed frozen in peace, unaware of the shadows creeping into the Coleman household. As they walked back, Lily skipped ahead with Shadow trotting beside her. "Dad?" she asked suddenly. "Are you going away again?" Ethan hesitated. "Not for a while, sweetheart." She stopped walking. "Promise?" He crouched to meet her eyes. "Promise." She smiled, and he realized how rare that expression had become lately, pure, unguarded joy. When they returned home, Clara's car wasn't in the driveway. Good. He needed time to think. While Lily took a nap in the living room, curled beside Shadow, Ethan went upstairs to unpack. As he lifted his suitcase onto the bed, a folded letter fell out, a note written in his daughter's careful, looping handwriting. "I saved a slice of cake for you." He stared at it for a long moment, his throat tightening. Then something caught his attention, a faint humming sound from the hall. It was coming from Clara's study. He hesitated, then pushed the door open. The room was spotless, almost too spotless, except for a small black folder on the desk. The papers inside bore the official header of Silverbrook Community Trust Fund, a department-managed charity for victims of domestic abuse. Ethan's name was printed at the bottom as an approving officer. But the signature wasn't his. He frowned, tracing the forged signature with his thumb. The handwriting was close, eerily close, but not quite right. He checked the date. It was from 2 weeks ago, and the approved transaction, $48,000. Recipient, C. Coleman. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped him out of his trance. Clara was back. Quickly, he slid the folder back into place and closed the drawer. Downstairs, Lily stirred awake. Shadow lifted his head, ears pricking as the door opened. Clara's heels clicked sharply on the tiles. She carried a small paper bag that smelled faintly of perfume and something else. Money. "Have a good day?" Ethan asked evenly. "Productive," she replied, her smile thin. "Where's Lily?" "Sleeping." "Good. I have calls to make. Could you walk the dog? He's been restless." "I already did." She looked at him. Something unreadable flickered behind her eyes. Suspicion, maybe, or calculation. "You're quiet today," she said finally. "Just tired." "Well, rest then. You deserve it." She leaned in, kissing his cheek. The gesture was warm, but it carried the chill of pretense. Ethan watched her walk upstairs, her phone already pressed to her ear. He sat back, staring at the window where the snow had started to fall again. Shadow moved beside him, resting his head on Ethan's lap. "We'll figure it out, boy," Ethan murmured. "Whatever she's hiding, we'll find it." Outside, the light faded, and the town slipped into twilight. In the upstairs window, Clara's silhouette passed once, then disappeared. In her hand, unseen by Ethan, was a small envelope addressed to Evan Morris. Night fell early in Silverbrook that week. The snow that had softened the streets now turned to ice, clinging to the gutters like silver veins. From the outside, the Coleman house looked peaceful, its porch light glowing a warm amber, smoke curling from the chimney. But inside, silence was no longer peace. It was surveillance. It was the hum of secrets waiting to be discovered. Ethan sat in his study, the lamplight stretching long shadows across the wall. On the desk lay a fresh report from the precinct about an ongoing corruption case, a reminder that lies were his profession to uncover. Yet the folder he wanted to read again was the one hidden in the drawer beneath his elbow, Clara's forged signature, the missing $48,000. He stared at it as though it might confess something on its own. Shadow lay at his feet, alert despite his stillness. His thick coat shimmered faintly under the light, one ear twitching every time the house creaked. The dog had grown more restless lately, padding the hallway at night, sometimes pausing by Lily's door and whining softly. Ethan knew that behavior well. It was the sound of unease. Upstairs, Clara's voice floated faintly through the ceiling, calm and deliberate. She was on the phone again. He couldn't hear the words, but he recognized the rhythm, measured, careful, deceit wrapped in civility. The same tone she used when she had persuaded him months ago to let her manage small community outreach donations to help the department's image. He wondered now if that was the beginning of it all. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The study door opened slightly, revealing Lily in her flannel pajamas, clutching her teddy bear. "Daddy," she whispered, "can I stay with you a little? It's too quiet upstairs." Ethan smiled gently, gesturing her in. "Of course, sweetheart. Come here." She climbed into his lap, curling against him while Shadow shifted closer, resting his chin on the girl's foot. "You working?" she asked. "Just reading," he murmured, closing the drawer. "How's my brave girl?" She hesitated. "Mommy Clara said I can't go near your office anymore." Ethan froze. "She said that?" Lily nodded, tracing a finger along his sleeve. "She said I'll distract you and that you're too busy to play." He exhaled slowly, fighting the weight pressing behind his ribs. "You can come here anytime you want, okay? This is your home too." Lily smiled faintly, but her voice wavered. "Can Shadow sleep in my room again?" He looked toward the door. Did she say no? "She said he smells," Lily said, eyes dropping. Shadow lifted his head as if understanding, giving a low, protective growl that rumbled softly through the quiet. Ethan's hand found the dog's fur, steadying him. "He doesn't smell, baby. He smells like courage." Lily giggled softly. It was the first sound of real laughter Ethan had heard in days. He carried her upstairs after she dozed off in his lap, laying her gently in bed. As he straightened the blanket, something caught his eye on her nightstand. A small frame photo of a woman with light hair and kind eyes. Her mother, Laura Coleman, the one person whose presence still haunted every corner of this house. Laura had been a nurse, known for her warmth and patience, the kind of woman who stopped to help stray animals or mend torn mittens for neighborhood kids. She had died 5 years earlier in a car accident while driving home from a night shift. The tragedy had broken Ethan in ways no bullet ever could. It was Laura's death that had left space for Clara to enter their lives, when Ethan, grieving and exhausted, mistook distraction for love. As Ethan turned to leave the room, he heard a faint scratching at the window. Shadow stood near the curtains, tail stiff, ears forward. The sound came again. Scrape, scrape, soft, but steady. Ethan parted the curtain and found nothing outside but snow drifting through the dim porch light. He shook his head. "Probably the tree branch," he muttered, but Shadow's low growl didn't ease until Ethan closed the window. Downstairs, the front door opened quietly. Clara returned from wherever she'd been, the cold wind following her inside. She wore a long wool coat, the fur collar dusted with snow. In her gloved hand, she held a small envelope and a leather-bound planner. "You're still awake," she said when she saw Ethan coming down the stairs. "I couldn't sleep," he replied, voice even. "Where were you?" "Book club," she said smoothly, unbuttoning her coat. "You know how it goes. Just a few of us from the charity board." Ethan's gaze drifted to the planner. "That the same board where 48,000 disappeared?" Her smile didn't falter, but her grip on the envelope tightened. "You went through my things, didn't you?" "I found something," he said quietly. "Something that doesn't add up." Clara's tone cooled. "You're a policeman, Ethan, not an accountant. Don't go imagining conspiracies where there aren't any." He stepped closer, his height casting a shadow over her. "Then explain why your signature's on a transfer I never authorized." She laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. "You think I'd steal from you? From our own community fund? God, you're paranoid. Maybe all those years chasing criminals made you forget what trust looks like." He held her gaze, but her deflection only deepened his certainty. "Maybe I just finally remember what lies sound like." She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes hard. Then she smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hid daggers. "You're tired, Ethan, and you're letting grief turn you into someone bitter. Go to bed. Tomorrow we'll both feel foolish about this." But as she turned to go upstairs, he caught a glimpse of the envelope again, an address written neatly in black ink, E. Morris. His chest tightened. Evan Morris. The name of a financial consultant Ethan had once worked with on precinct budgeting. A man with charm like silk and morals like dust. He remembered dismissing him years ago after rumors of unethical deals. What could Clara be doing with him now? When he looked back up, Clara was gone, her footsteps fading down the hallway. Shadow paced the floor restlessly, claws clicking against the hardwood. Ethan crouched beside him, whispering, "We'll keep our eyes open, buddy." The next morning dawned gray and windless. Clara had already left by the time Ethan came downstairs. A note lay on the counter. "Breakfast for Lily's at Mrs. Parker's. I'll be home late." Mrs. Parker, the neighbor 2 houses down, was a widow in her 50s with silver hair cropped short and a motherly calm about her. She had been Laura's best friend once, and she'd always watched out for Lily when Clara's sharpness went too far. Ethan trusted her, perhaps more than anyone else left in Silverbrook. He found Lily at Mrs. Parker's kitchen table, happily eating waffles dusted with powdered sugar. Mrs. Parker looked up as he entered, her soft blue eyes narrowing slightly at his tired face. "Rough night?" she asked. "Something like that," Ethan said. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have." Mrs. Parker wiped her hands on her apron. "That woman of yours, she's polite, but cold as February. You sure she's the right one to raise that girl?" Ethan didn't answer, just smiled faintly. "You always did get straight to the point." "I watched Laura die twice," Mrs. Parker said quietly. "Once on that road, and once when you brought Clara home. Don't let there be a third time, Ethan." Her words stayed with him as he walked Lily home. The air had turned heavy again, clouds thickening like bruises over the hills. Shadow walked ahead, tail stiff, nose lifted to the wind. Halfway up the driveway, he stopped suddenly, ears pointed toward the garage. A faint metallic sound came from inside, like something small falling. Ethan froze, hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. He opened the garage door slowly. Inside, the light bulb flickered weakly. There was nothing at first, just boxes, tools, and a faint smell of gasoline. Then he saw it, a muddy footprint leading away from the back window, half smudged but fresh. Human. He scanned the ground, noticing a torn scrap of paper caught under the tire of his truck. Picking it up, he read a line in hurried handwriting. "The truth isn't upstairs. It's under your roof." No signature. He looked at Shadow, whose low growl vibrated against the walls. "Looks like we're not the only ones watching," he whispered. When he turned toward the house, Lily was at the doorway, clutching her bear. "Daddy?" He forced a smile. "Go inside, sweetheart. Everything's fine." But even as he said it, the wind carried the sound of a car engine starting in the distance. Clara's car, leaving again. And this time, Ethan knew. It wasn't for book club. The following day broke under a restless sky. A light snow drifted across Silverbrook, but the beauty of winter had turned brittle, too pale, too quiet. Inside the Coleman house, every creak sounded like a whisper out of place. Ethan woke before dawn, sitting on the edge of the bed, still thinking about the muddy footprint he had found in the garage. Whoever left that note, "The truth isn't upstairs, it's under your roof," had known something about his home, about Clara, about the money. The thought refused to leave him. Downstairs, Shadow lay beside the fireplace, his breath visible in the faint morning chill. The German shepherd was restless again. Every so often, his head would rise, ears pricking, as if hearing something beyond human perception. The dog had become a living alarm, attuned not only to danger, but to the unease that lingered between the walls. Ethan poured himself a cup of black coffee, his reflection dark in the glass window. Snowflakes slid down the pane like tiny ghosts. At 7, Lily padded into the kitchen, her hair messy and her eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning, Daddy," she murmured. "Morning, Pumpkin," Ethan said, trying to sound light. He handed her a bowl of oatmeal. "Eat up. I'll walk you to school today." Her face lit up, a rare, genuine joy. "Really? With Shadow?" "With Shadow," he confirmed. By the time they reached Silverbrook Elementary, the sun had finally pushed through the clouds, casting a thin silver light over the small brick school building. The crossing guard, Mr. Dawson, waved them across the street. He was in his 60s, stocky, with a bright red scarf and a voice always half a laugh away. "Morning, Officer Coleman. Bringing your partner in crime again?" Ethan chuckled, patting Shadow's head. "Wouldn't go anywhere without him." "Good man," Dawson said, smiling at Lily. "You be good now, young lady, and don't let this old man catch you running in the halls again." Lily giggled, waving as she joined the stream of children. Ethan watched her disappear into the building, that small, brave silhouette against the winter light. He didn't leave right away. Instead, he crossed the street to the small cafe on the corner, Bean and Branch, where the windows were always fogged from the morning rush. The bell jingled as he stepped inside. Behind the counter was Nora Ellison, the owner, a woman in her late 40s with cropped silver-streaked hair, tired eyes, and a laugh that could thaw the coldest morning. She had been a paramedic once, before her husband's passing drove her to slow down and open the cafe. The scent of coffee and cinnamon wrapped around her like armor. "Ethan Coleman," she greeted warmly. "You look like you've been living on adrenaline and regret again. Black coffee?" He smiled faintly. "You know me too well." "Everyone in this town's seen that face before," she said, pouring the coffee. "It's the cop trying not to fall apart face. I used to wear it." He gave a quiet laugh, though his eyes stayed distant. "I just found something strange yesterday, in my garage." "Strange like what?" "Footprints, and a note. Someone's been near my house." Nora's expression sharpened. "You think someone's targeting you?" "I don't know," he said. "Could be a prank, or maybe something worse. Clara's been off lately." "Off how?" "She's hiding something, and she's good at it." Nora leaned against the counter, lowering her voice. "You want my opinion? Trust the dog. Animals don't lie." Ethan looked down into his cup. He hasn't slept right in days. When he left the cafe, he noticed a dark sedan parked down the street, windows tinted, engine idling faintly beneath the hum of morning traffic. He memorized the plate number out of habit, 7KZ 8132. Then it drove off slowly, turning at the corner toward Maple Drive. By the time Ethan got home, Clara was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She looked up with a rehearsed smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're early. I thought you'd be at the station." "I wanted to talk." "About what?" He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "About last night. There was someone in our garage." Her face didn't change, not a flicker. "What do you mean?" "I found footprints, fresh. Someone left a note." "A note?" She tilted her head, feigning surprise. "What did it say?" He watched her carefully. "That the truth isn't upstairs." Clara blinked slowly, then smiled thinly. "Poetic for a burglar, don't you think?" "Not if they knew what they were looking for." She stood, smoothing her blouse. "Ethan, If you're suggesting I'm involved in some ridiculous conspiracy, then I don't know what to tell you. I'm suggesting you start telling the truth, he said quietly. Something cold passed through her expression. Not fear, but calculation. You're tired. You're seeing shadows where there aren't any. Maybe talk to someone at work about stress management. He leaned forward. Who's Evan Morris? The room froze. For the first time, Clara's mask cracked. It was just a second, a flicker. But Ethan saw it, panic, raw and unmistakable. Then it was gone. An investor, she said evenly. He's been helping me organize the charity's accounts. Why? Ethan didn't answer. Shadow lying by the door gave a low rumble. Clara's gaze darted toward the dog before she turned sharply and grabbed her purse. I have to run errands. I'll see you tonight. When the door closed, Ethan exhaled slowly. He picked up his keys and jacket. Come on, boy. We're going to see someone. At the precinct, the lobby buzzed with chatter and the smell of burnt coffee. Sergeant Ray Torres, Ethan's longtime friend and former partner, spotted him immediately. Ray was in his 40s, built like a linebacker, with dark skin, a close-cropped beard, and the kind of loyalty that made enemies nervous. Coleman, thought you were still on leave. What brings you in? I need a favor, Ethan said, lowering his voice. Quiet one. Ray raised an eyebrow. Those are my least favorite kind. I need a background check on someone. Evan Morris, used to work around the department's finance contracts. Something's off. Ray's easy grin faded. That guy? Yeah, I remember him. Smooth talker. Got canned from a corporate audit firm last year. Word was he was laundering money through nonprofit shells. Ethan's stomach tightened. Nonprofits like community funds? Ray nodded slowly. You think he's circling your wife's charity? I think he already has. Ray scribbled on a notepad. Give me an hour. I'll dig. Ethan left the precinct with a strange heaviness in his chest. As he reached his car, he noticed something under the windshield wiper. A folded piece of paper. He unfolded it cautiously. Inside was a photo, grainy, clearly taken from a distance. It showed Clara standing beside Evan Morris in front of a hotel downtown. They were close, smiling. Behind them, a black sedan, 7K ZID 8132. There was a single line scrawled on the back. She's playing both sides before she buries you too. By evening, snow had begun to fall again. The house glowed faintly through the twilight, but the warmth felt false. Lily was upstairs coloring quietly, unaware of the storm brewing under her roof. Clara had not returned. Ethan sat in the study, the photo spread across the desk, beside the fake signatures and the note from the garage. Shadow rested near the window, tail thumping once in a slow, steady rhythm. Outside, the same dark sedan rolled past the house again, this time slower, the same license plate. Ethan rose, watching through the blinds. Looks like our visitor came back, he whispered. Shadow gave a sharp bark, deep in warning. Across the street, the sedan stopped, just for a second, before driving off again into the storm. Ethan's reflection stared back from the window. A man at the edge of his own story, trapped between truth and trust. He whispered to the empty room, If you're watching, whoever you are, I'm watching back. And upstairs, beneath the hum of the heater, Lily's laughter rose, small, fragile, and oblivious, like a flicker of hope in a house built on silence. The storm came without warning that night. Heavy snow beat against the windows of the Coleman house, muffling the world into silence. The wind howled through the trees, bending them like old men in prayer. Inside, Ethan sat by the dim light of his desk lamp, staring at the photograph of Clara and Evan outside the hotel. The longer he looked, the more the image blurred between disbelief and fury. The room smelled faintly of rain-soaked fur. Shadow was curled beside the desk, his breathing steady but shallow, as though even sleep had become a wary act. It was past midnight when the first noise came, a dull thud from outside. Shadow's ears pricked, his muscles tensing. Ethan froze, the instinct of a cop returning like muscle memory. He turned off the light, moved quietly to the window, and parted the curtain. Through the veil of falling snow, headlights flickered briefly before cutting out. A car had stopped near the gate. Shadow gave a low growl, barely audible, the kind that came from deep in his chest. Ethan whispered, Stay, then slipped his service pistol from the drawer. He moved through the hallway barefoot, each step measured. The old house groaned faintly as if warning him to stop. When he reached the door, the porch light flared from the wind, and there, standing by the gate, was a figure. At first he thought it was Clara, but the shape was wrong. Shorter, broader. The person wore a dark coat and a wool cap pulled low. When Ethan opened the door halfway, the wind almost tore it from his hand. "Who's there?" he called out. The figure raised both hands. "Easy, don't shoot." The voice was male, strained but steady. Ethan stepped into the light, weapon still lowered but ready. "Name." "Name's Nick Sanders," the man said, pulling off his cap. He was in his late 30s, with sharp eyes beneath a mess of dark hair and a week's worth of beard. His face had the weary look of someone who hadn't slept or trusted anyone in days. "I used to work with Evan Morris. Guess that name rings a bell." Ethan didn't move. "Keep talking." Nick's breath came out in mist. "You don't know me, but I know what your wife and Morris are doing. I came because you deserve to know before it's too late." "Too late for what?" Nick looked around nervously. "You got somewhere we can talk? It's freezing, and I don't fancy being seen out here." After a long moment, Ethan nodded, motioning him inside. Shadow stood at the threshold, growling low. The man paused, staring at the dog. "Beautiful animal," he said quietly. "German Shepherd, right? Smart breed." "Smarter than most people I know," Ethan replied. They sat in the kitchen. Nick's hands trembled as he held the mug Ethan offered. Under the harsh light, Ethan saw him clearer, the fine scars on his knuckles, the faint tattoo on his wrist, a pattern of broken wings. "You were in the military?" Ethan asked. Nick nodded. "Marine, 6 years, worked private security after that. Got involved with Morris's firm when I got desperate. Big mistake." "Go on." Nick leaned forward. "Your wife's charity isn't a charity. It's a laundering front. Morris set it up years ago using community foundations as shells. He moves small sums through local accounts, grants, sponsorships, donations, then channels them into offshore transfers. It stays invisible because it looks like standard outreach funding." Ethan's jaw clenched. "And Clara?" "She's his insider. She signs the authorizations, makes it look clean. She gets a cut for her part." Ethan's pulse thudded in his ears. "Why tell me this?" "Because I tried to pull out," Nick said quietly. "I told Morris I was done. Next day my car blew up in a parking lot. I barely made it out." Ethan frowned. "You go to the police?" Nick laughed dryly. "Half of them are in Morris's pocket, at least in Portland. And me, I'm dead weight. But you're still clean. And you're the one thing Clara didn't account for." Ethan stood, pacing. "You have proof?" Nick reached into his coat slowly and placed a small USB drive on the table. "Everything, transactions, messages, offshore accounts, all linked. You'll find your wife's name all over it." For a moment, the only sound was the storm pressing against the house. Then came another noise, soft, sharp, the creak of the front gate. Shadow snapped his head toward the hallway, growling again. Ethan grabbed the pistol, motioning for Nick to stay down. He moved to the window. A pair of headlights flickered again through the snow, the same black sedan. License plate 7KZ8132. "They found me," Nick whispered, eyes wide. "How?" "I used a burner phone, but Morris has people everywhere. He probably traced me when I emailed your precinct contact. Damn it. Who did you email?" "A Sergeant Ray Torres," Nick said quickly. "He's the one you can trust, right? He's clean. I thought he could get this to you safely." Ethan froze. "You contacted Ray?" "Yes, yesterday. Told him to warn you." Ethan cursed under his breath. Ray hadn't mentioned any contact. Either he never got the message, or someone intercepted it. Outside, a car door slammed, then another. Footsteps crunched through the snow. Ethan turned off the light. "Get to the basement, now." Nick hesitated, but one look at Shadow's bared teeth convinced him. They moved quickly through the hallway, down the narrow stairs. The basement was cold, cluttered with old tools and boxes. Ethan handed Nick the USB. "Hide this. If anything happens—" "I'll guard it with my life," Nick said. They waited. The footsteps reached the porch, the sound of metal, lockpicks, or a crowbar. Shadow's growl deepened. Ethan, crouched near the stairs, gun raised. The front door creaked open, a draft sweeping down the hallway. A silhouette moved inside. One, then two figures. Both wore dark coats and gloves. "Search upstairs," one whispered. "He's supposed to be alone." The second man moved toward the study. Their steps were cautious, professional, not thieves, enforcers. Ethan glanced at Nick. "Stay here." He moved up the stairs silently, hugging the wall. The house had become a battlefield again. Every sound magnified. He saw the first man near the living room, scanning with a flashlight. Ethan fired once, a warning shot that hit the doorframe. "Police! Drop it!" The intruder spun, gun raised. Two shots echoed. Shadow lunged from the hallway, teeth flashing. The man went down hard, yelling as the dog pinned his arm. The second figure fled through the back door, vanishing into the storm. When silence fell again, Ethan knelt beside the wounded man. The intruder groaned, his mask half torn off, revealing a narrow face and cold gray eyes. "Who sent you?" Ethan demanded. The man spat blood, smirking. "You already know." "Morris?" "No," the man hissed. "Your wife?" Before Ethan could react, the man's eyes rolled back. He'd bitten something, a capsule. Within seconds, his body went limp. Shadow barked once, sharp and confused. Ethan stared, the echo of the words, "Your wife," still burning in his head. When he returned to the basement, Nick was gone. Only the faint sound of the storm remained, and the small metallic glint of the USB drive lying on the concrete floor where Nick had dropped it. By dawn, the police had arrived, summoned by Ethan's call. The report would say 2 intruders, 1 dead, 1 escaped. No mention of Nick, no mention of the drive. Ethan kept that hidden. As the house emptied and the snow lightened outside, Ethan sat in his study, staring at the dead man's final words written in his notes. "Your wife." Shadow lay by his feet, eyes fixed on the front door. He was still waiting, listening, and Ethan, for the first time, realized he might have married the very danger he'd sworn to protect others from. By the time dawn broke over Silverbrook, the world looked bleached and hollow. The police cars had gone, leaving behind only tire tracks and a silence that felt heavier than snow. The living room was still streaked with mud and blood from the night before, and the faint smell of gunpowder clung to the walls. Ethan stood by the fireplace, staring into the dying embers, the USB drive turning over and over between his fingers. Every few seconds, Shadow shifted his weight beside him, restless, as if sensing something in his master that words couldn't reach. Lily had been taken to stay with Mrs. Parker for the day. Ethan insisted. He didn't want her near the house until he knew what danger still lingered. Clara had not returned, not a call, not even a message. He told the precinct she was out of town, visiting relatives. It was easier than explaining the truth, that he suspected his wife of treachery, of murder, perhaps worse. He plugged the USB drive into his old laptop. The screen flickered to life, casting a pale blue glow across the study. Dozens of files appeared, spreadsheets, bank transfers, scanned documents. One folder was labeled EM Project. He opened it and froze. The transactions matched the missing community funds, but there were also messages, exchanges between Clara and Evan Morris. C. The officer doesn't suspect anything. He thinks the audit delay is routine. E. Good. Keep him out of it. Once the last transfer clears, we disappear. C. What about the girl? E. She'll forget. They always do. Ethan's breath caught, his pulse hammered as he scrolled faster. Photos, receipts, offshore accounts, and one email dated 2 nights ago. C. I'll handle him tonight. You'll have the green light by morning. The timestamp matched the night the intruders came. His jaw clenched. Handle him tonight. It wasn't just a plan, it was an execution order. Shadow growled softly, ears twitching toward the window. Ethan turned. A black SUV rolled slowly past the house before disappearing down the street. The same dark sedan from before. He went cold. They were watching again. He shut the laptop, pocketed the drive, and grabbed his coat. "Come on, boy, we're going for a drive." They reached the Silverbrook precinct around 9. The building looked the same as always. plain brick, the flag stiff in the winter wind. But today, it felt different. Inside, Sergeant Ray Torres looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Ray said. Ethan dropped into the chair across from him. "You ever hear from a man named Nick Sanders?" Ray frowned. "No, should I have?" "He said he contacted you, sent an email." Ray shook his head. "I didn't get anything. Maybe it got filtered." Ethan studied his face carefully. Ray looked sincere, but doubt crawled through him anyway. "Nick's dead," Ethan said. "Or missing. He was working with Morris." Ray's expression darkened. "Morris? That crook again? I thought Internal Affairs shut his operations down." "They didn't shut him down," Ethan said. "They just pushed him underground. He's using local charities to launder money, including the one Clara runs." Ray exhaled. "Jesus, you're telling me your wife's part of it?" Ethan didn't answer. He slid the USB across the desk. "See for yourself. I need this verified before it disappears." Ray hesitated. "You sure you want me to look at this?" "Yeah, but don't tell anyone else." "Not even Captain Brooks?" Ethan's gaze hardened. "Especially not Brooks." Ray nodded slowly, slipping the drive into his drawer. "I'll make a copy tonight, run it through my home system, fewer eyes." "Thanks," Ethan said quietly. As he stood to leave, Ray added, "Coleman, if this thing blows open, it's not just your career on the line, it's your life." "I know," Ethan said, pulling his coat tighter. "It already is." Back at the house, the sky had turned a steely gray. Ethan poured himself a glass of water, but stopped when he noticed a faint smell, something sharp, chemical. He followed it to the backyard. Smoke curled from the fire pit near the fence. When he got closer, his stomach dropped. Among the ashes were the melted remains of plastic, the same kind of folder Clara kept her charity documents in. He grabbed a stick and turned over the charred scraps. Beneath them was a single piece of half-burnt paper, Silverbrook Community Trust, disbursement authorization. The signature line was empty. She hadn't finished burning everything. He pocketed the fragment, heart pounding. Then Shadow barked, short, urgent. Not the sound of greeting, but of alarm. Ethan turned just in time to see a figure darting away through the trees at the edge of the property. He sprinted after them, snow crunching underfoot. The person was fast, dressed in black, hood pulled up. Ethan shouted, "Police! Stop!" But the figure vanished into the woods. He knelt where the tracks ended, a cigarette butt, still warm, half buried in the snow. The brand was imported, expensive, the kind Evan Morris favored. He remembered the same scent on Clara's coat weeks ago. That night, exhaustion hit him like a wave. He collapsed onto the couch with Shadow at his feet. The house felt too quiet, too hollow. He thought of Lily's laughter, of Laura's photo still standing on the nightstand upstairs, smiling at a version of him that no longer existed. He whispered, "What do I do, Laura?" He must have drifted asleep, because when he opened his eyes, it was nearly midnight, and the phone was ringing. He answered groggily. "Coleman." "Ethan," a familiar voice said. "Clara." His heart jolted. "Where are you?" "You need to stop looking," she said, her tone cold and almost mechanical. "You don't understand what you're getting into." "I understand enough," he said. "You tried to have me killed." Silence. Then a quiet exhale. "You think this was about you? You were never the target." "Then who was?" Another pause. "The girl. She's leverage." Every word hit like ice water. "You touch her, I swear to God." "I'm not the one you should be threatening," she interrupted. "They're already watching you. You have something they want." "The drive?" "Destroy it," she said sharply, "before it destroys you." Then the line went dead. Ethan stood there, the phone still pressed to his ear, the world spinning. Shadow whined softly, nudging his hand as if to ground him. Outside, the snow had stopped, but the night glowed faintly, too bright, almost artificial. Then he realized why. Across the street, a car idled with its headlights off, the faint glow of a cigarette ember inside. He drew the curtain slowly, hand tightening around the phone. He was no longer dealing with secrets. This was surveillance, preparation, the calm before something worse. He picked up the USB drive from the desk and turned it over in his hand. Clara's words echoed in his head. Destroy it before it destroys you. But Ethan wasn't that kind of man. He slid the drive into his pocket, walked to the basement, and lifted the loose floorboard beneath the tool bench. He placed it inside, covering it with dust and old rags. They won't get it, he whispered. Upstairs, Shadow barked again. Sharp, warning. Ethan froze. Then came the sound, a faint click from the back door. Someone was inside the house. He drew his gun, moving silently toward the kitchen. A shadow crossed the hall. When he turned the corner, a hand grabbed his shoulder. He spun, ready to strike, but stopped when he saw the face. It was Ray Torres. Jesus, Ray, Ethan hissed. What the hell are you doing here? Ray's eyes darted around the room. They know, Ethan. Somebody tipped them off. You've got to move. Now. Who? Morris's men. Maybe more. They're on their way. How do you know? Ray hesitated. Because I followed one of them from the precinct. He was heading straight here. I don't think you have more than an hour. Ethan's gut twisted. Then we take Lily and disappear. Ray nodded grimly. I'll help you pack. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying with it the faint, distant echo of engines, more than one, coming fast down Maple Drive. The night broke apart under the growl of engines. From the window of the Coleman house, headlights slashed through the snow like knives. 3 black SUVs rolled down Maple Drive, their tires crunching against the frost. Ethan's pulse quickened. This wasn't surveillance anymore. It was a siege. He turned to Ray, who stood by the door, shoulders squared, face carved with urgency. We don't have time, Ray said, his deep voice low but firm. Grab Lily. I'll cover the front. Ethan sprinted upstairs. The hallway lights flickered from the storm outside, throwing his shadow long and warped across the walls. He burst into Lily's room. She was already awake, sitting up in bed clutching her stuffed bear. Daddy, she whispered. Why are there cars outside? He knelt beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder, despite the chaos swelling below. We're going on a trip, sweetheart, right now. You trust me? She nodded quickly, fear flickering in her wide blue eyes. Good girl, he said softly, helping her into her coat. Shadow stood by the door, hackles raised, eyes glinting amber in the dark. The 6-year-old German shepherd looked like living stone, his stance tense but ready. Ethan strapped on his holster, grabbed the go-bag from the closet, one he'd packed long ago out of old police habit, and hoisted Lily into his arms. Downstairs, Ray had moved the sofa to block the main window. The sound of car doors slamming echoed from outside. They're spreading out, he said. 2 in front, 1 around back. You got a back exit? Basement, Ethan said. It opens near the woods. Perfect. Go. I'll draw their attention. I'm not leaving you here, Ethan argued. Ray gave him a sharp look, the kind that ended arguments before they began. You'll get her out. That's an order, officer. It was the same tone Ray used when they worked together years ago. Firm, unshakable, laced with quiet loyalty. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. See you at the cabin, he said, referring to an old ranger outpost they once used for training deep in Silver Hollow woods. Ray smiled faintly. You still remember that place? Thought you'd forgotten everything that mattered. Not this, Ethan said, then turned and disappeared down the basement steps with Lily and Shadow close behind. They slipped out through the small cellar door just as gunfire cracked from the front of the house. Lily flinched, burying her face in Ethan's jacket. Shadow barked once, low, protective. The snow outside was knee-deep, glittering under the porch light. Ethan crouched low, scanning the tree line. We stay quiet, he whispered, and we don't stop until the road ends. The woods were darker than he remembered. Branches sagged under the weight of ice, and the moon barely pierced the clouds. Every step crunched softly, echoing in the vast, cold silence. He moved, fast, guided more by instinct than vision. Shadow kept to his right, his nose low to the ground, tail stiff, the trained gait of a police dog reading invisible trails of threat. After what felt like an hour, they reached the frozen riverbed near Silver Hollow Bridge. The old wooden structure was barely standing, its railings half-rotted and its beams crusted with snow. Ethan crouched behind a fallen log, setting Lily down. Her small breaths puffed white in the air. "Daddy," she whispered, "is Uncle Ray coming too?" Ethan hesitated. "He's making sure we have time. That's what good friends do." A distant explosion tore through the night, the direction of the house. Ethan's chest tightened. Ray had stayed behind, and now the fire glowed faintly on the horizon. "Come on," he murmured, lifting Lily again. "We keep moving." By dawn, the snowstorm had eased into a quiet flurry. The cabin finally came into view, a lonely shape among the trees, smoke long absent from its chimney. It belonged to Margaret Maggie Lorne, an old park ranger and one of the few people Ethan still trusted. She was a tall woman in her 60s, her frame lean from years in the wild, with white hair always tied back under a wool cap. Maggie had a kind of calm strength that made even the fiercest storms seem manageable. When Ethan knocked, she opened the door instantly, as if she'd been expecting him. "I figured I'd see you again," she said, her gravelly voice steady. "You look like you've been chased by ghosts." "Worse," Ethan said. "Men with guns." Maggie's eyes flicked past him to Lily. "Get her inside before she freezes." The cabin smelled of pine resin and burnt coffee. A small stove flickered weakly in the corner. Maggie poured them both tea, then sat across from him, elbows on her knees. "Talk!" Ethan told her everything. The USB, Clara, Morris, the ambush. By the time he finished, Maggie's expression had turned grim. "I warned you about her years ago," she said softly. She had that look, the kind that hides too much behind the smile. Ethan rubbed his face. "You think she'll come after Lily?" "She already has," Maggie said simply. "And if she's desperate, she'll send more men." Ethan glanced at Shadow, who had settled by the door, alert but quiet. "Then we make this place a fortress," he said. Maggie's lips curved slightly. Still the stubborn cop. "Fine. You take upstairs. I'll check the perimeter." While Maggie worked, Ethan explored the attic, searching for anything useful. Old Ranger gear, flares, a dusty shortwave radio, and beneath a stack of blankets, a rifle wrapped in oilcloth. He recognized it immediately, his own, the one he'd given to Maggie years ago. "You kept it," he said when she returned. "I don't throw away good tools," she said, loading it smoothly. "And right now, you're going to need it." They set traps along the back path and covered the windows. Lily helped where she could, handing Ethan nails or whispering to Shadow as if the dog were her guardian angel. Despite the tension, there was something steadying in her presence, a reminder of why he was fighting at all. Around noon, the radio crackled. A faint voice came through, distorted by static. "Coleman, if you can hear this, don't go to the station. They're compromised. Brooks is..." The transmission cut off. Ethan stared at the device. The voice was Ray's. "He's alive," he said. Relief washed through him, brief but real. Maggie frowned. "Compromised how?" "No idea," Ethan said. "But if Brooks, my captain, is in this, then it's worse than I thought." He turned to the window. The snow had stopped, leaving a brittle, blinding stillness. He could see faint tire tracks along the ridge, too new to be from Maggie. Someone was still following. That night, the cabin glowed softly in the dark. Maggie sat by the fire, cleaning her rifle while Lily slept on the couch, her hand resting on Shadow's back. Ethan stood by the window, watching the tree line, every nerve taut. "Still thinking like a cop," Maggie said without looking up. "Can't help it," he murmured. She smirked. "That's why you'll survive this." He turned to her. "I keep asking myself how it all went wrong. I married the wrong person, trusted the wrong people." Maggie shook her head. "You didn't marry the wrong person. You just didn't see what grief does to people. Some bend under it, some turn it into hunger." Her words hung in the air. Ethan nodded slowly. Then Shadow lifted his head suddenly, ears pricked. A low growl rolled through his chest. Maggie's eyes flicked to the window. "They're back," she whispered. Outside, 2 headlights blinked through the trees, approaching slow, deliberate. Ethan grabbed his pistol. "Get Lily," he said. "If I don't make it, you run." Maggie stood, cocking the rifle. Not without a fight. The first shot shattered the cabin window. And just like that, the quiet refuge of Silver Hollow became a battlefield. The first bullet cracked through the air like thunder. It struck the window frame inches from Ethan's shoulder, scattering splinters of wood into the dim light. Shadow barked sharply, leaping to the window, his teeth bared. Maggie ducked behind the stove, dragging Lily to the floor. "Down!" she barked, her voice raw from years of command. Outside, the headlights shut off, plunging the woods into darkness. The attackers knew what they were doing. They were patient, professional, and invisible. Ethan crouched behind the doorframe, his breath steady, his gun raised. He could see faint movement in the snow, the blur of a figure shifting between the trees. "Two of them, maybe three," he murmured. Maggie loaded her rifle, the old bolt clicking with mechanical precision. "I count 4, she said quietly. "The fourth one's flanking from the ridge. You take the front. I'll handle the side." Ethan nodded. The sound of his own heartbeat filled his ears. The world shrank to the cold rhythm of survival. He leaned toward Shadow, who was trembling with controlled energy. "Stay with Lily. Protect her," he whispered. Shadow whined softly but obeyed, padding over to where Lily crouched beside Maggie's gear chest. The little girl clutched her stuffed bear tight, her eyes wide and dry, too afraid even to cry. Another gunshot echoed, this time hitting the lantern on the wall. The cabin went dark, save for the weak orange glow of the stove. Sparks danced briefly, then faded. Ethan fired twice toward the flash in the woods, aiming by instinct. The bullets cracked into the night, followed by silence. Then, a voice, muffled, male, confident. "Officer Coleman, you're outnumbered. Hand over the drive and nobody gets hurt." Ethan felt a surge of cold anger. "That's a lie," he shouted back. "You kill everyone who gets in your way." A short, cruel laugh answered. "We don't need everyone, just you, and the kid." Ethan's blood turned to ice. He motioned to Maggie, who was reloading calmly, her eyes hard as stone. "We have to move," he whispered. "They'll set fire next." "Follow me," Maggie said. She knew the land better than anyone. There was an old escape tunnel beneath the floorboards, a ranger's route leading down to the riverbank. She pulled aside the rug, revealing the hatch. "It's tight, but it'll take you out behind the ridge." "What about you?" Ethan asked. "I'll slow them down," Maggie said. "This isn't my first siege." Before Ethan could protest, another explosion rocked the cabin. A flash grenade, the light searing white, the room filled with smoke. Shadow growled, lunging toward the window as a figure appeared there, half silhouetted by the flames. The intruder raised his gun, but Shadow was faster. The dog hit him square in the chest, dragging him through the frame into the snow outside. The two rolled violently, a blur of fur and blood. "Shadow!" Lily screamed. Ethan grabbed her, pulling her toward the hatch. "Go! Now!" he yelled. Maggie fired from the doorway, her rifle booming like a drumbeat. She took down one man near the tree line before ducking behind the porch post. "I'll hold them!" she shouted. Ethan climbed down the narrow tunnel, Lily clutching his neck, her sobs muffled against his jacket. The tunnel smelled of dirt and iron, the cold biting at their skin. He could hear the chaos above, gunfire, shouting, the crack of breaking wood. Then silence. When they emerged near the riverbank, dawn was bleeding faintly into the sky. Snow glittered under a dim wash of blue. Ethan looked back toward the cabin. Smoke rose in a slow, twisting column. There were no more gunshots, only the distant pop of burning timber. "Maggie," he whispered. A soft sound made him turn. Shadow limped toward them from the trees, his fur matted with blood, but his eyes bright. One ear was torn, and a gash ran down his shoulder, but he wagged his tail weakly when he saw Lily. She dropped to her knees, hugging him tight, whispering, "You're okay. You're okay." Ethan knelt beside them, pressing his forehead to the dog's. "Good boy," he murmured. "You did good." But there was no time to rest. They had to move before the remaining attackers regrouped. The nearest safe house was 5 miles east, an abandoned ranger station near the old quarry. He lifted Lily onto his back again, his breath coming in ragged clouds. "We'll find help there," he said, more to himself than to her. They followed the river's edge for nearly an hour. The path was steep, winding through frozen brush and uneven ground. Ethan's legs ached, but he didn't stop. Once he saw movement in the distance, a shadowy figure standing on the ridge, but when he blinked, it was gone. The silence of pursuit was worse than the chase itself. By the time they reached the quarry, the sun had climbed weakly above the horizon. The station was still there, a squat wooden structure half buried in snow, the radio antenna long collapsed. Ethan pushed the door open carefully. The hinges creaked, the sound echoing into the empty space. Inside, dust lay thick, but there were still supplies: canned food, an old lantern, a dusty cot. He set Lily down gently. "You rest," he said. "I'll find a signal." Shadow lay by the doorway, his eyes half-lidded, body trembling from exhaustion. Ethan tore an old blanket into strips and bandaged the dog's wounds as best he could. Shadow endured it silently, his gaze never leaving the window. After an hour of fiddling with the radio, Ethan finally caught a faint transmission. Static, then a woman's voice. "Is anyone out there? This is Silver County Dispatch. We've received reports of explosions near the hollow. Identify yourself." Ethan leaned in. "This is Officer Ethan Coleman, badge 4312. I have a minor and we are under pursuit. We need immediate extraction." Static crackled again. "Officer Coleman, you're listed as deceased." Ethan froze. "What did you say?" "Your precinct reported you KIA during the incident at Maple Drive. The report was filed by Captain Brooks himself." Rage and disbelief collided in his chest. "Listen to me," he said, his voice hard. "That report is false. I'm alive, and I have evidence of corruption within the department. Tell Ray Torres." The line cut off. The radio fell silent again. Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, are we safe now?" Ethan looked at her, at the trust in her small, tired face, and forced a smile. "For now," he said. He glanced outside. Snow was falling again, slow and relentless. But between the flakes, he saw something move, the faint gleam of metal from the trees. He ducked instinctively, pulling Lily close. Through the narrow crack of the window, he saw them, 2 men in dark coats, approaching the cabin silently. Ethan grabbed his gun and whispered, "Stay behind Shadow." The dog rose unsteadily, positioning himself between Lily and the door, his tail lowered, ears back, ready, even in pain. Outside, one of the men lifted a radio to his mouth. "Target confirmed. The officer and child are alive. Orders?" A pause. Then a voice Ethan recognized, cold and unmistakable. "Clara's?" "Bring them in," she said. "Alive, for now." The words echoed through the static as the wind howled louder, swallowing the sound of approaching boots. Snow fell in slow, endless silence, as if the sky itself mourned what was coming. The old ranger station stood on the edge of the quarry like a tired soldier refusing to kneel. Inside, Ethan knelt by the window, gun in hand, watching the 2 shadows approach through the trees. Their movements were precise, mirrored, trained men, not hired thugs. Behind him, Lily huddled near the cold stove, Shadow lying protectively in front of her, his wounded shoulder rising and falling with shallow breaths. The air smelled faintly of blood, smoke, and pine sap. "Daddy," Lily whispered, "why are they looking for us?" Ethan didn't answer at first. He couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth, that her mother had sent them. Finally, he said quietly, "Because we have something they're afraid of." He turned, forcing a faint smile. "But they won't win, sweetheart. Not this time." The door creaked slightly under the wind. The men outside were getting closer. Ethan knew they couldn't stay here. The radio had been jammed, the truck outside sabotaged. They were boxed in. Then a faint knock came, not from the door, but from the back wall. Shadow's ears pricked, a low growl forming in his throat. Ethan aimed his gun toward the sound. A voice whispered through the cracks in the wood. "It's me." Ethan froze. He recognized that voice, Ray Torres. He opened the side panel carefully, revealing a narrow crawl space behind the wall. Ray crouched there, half covered in snow, his face pale and drawn. A streak of blood ran down his temple, half frozen against his skin. "You look like hell," Ethan muttered. "Been through worse," Ray said, forcing a grin. "Maggie didn't make it. I saw the cabin burn from the ridge. I'm sorry, brother." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She saved us. That's all that matters." Ray crawled into the cabin, clutching a small duffel bag. He looked exhausted, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his thick parka torn at one shoulder. but his eyes still burned with that same unbreakable steadiness that had made him Ethan's best partner. "I've got something," he said. He unzipped the bag, revealing a laptop and a flash drive. "All your files, the transactions, the communications, even the false death report. I pulled them from Brooks's office before they noticed I was gone." Ethan stared at him, stunned. "How the hell did you get out?" Ray shrugged. "Didn't say I got out clean." He winced, touching his side. Blood seeped slowly between his fingers. "Damn it," Ethan said, pulling out the first aid kit. "Don't bother," Ray said, catching his wrist. "Not yet. You've got to send this data out. There's a comms tower near the ridge, still operational. If you get there, you can upload everything straight to the federal database. They can't bury it once it's live." Ethan looked out the window. The ridge was nearly 2 miles away, across open snow and a frozen ravine. "They'll see us before we get halfway there." Ray smiled grimly. "Then I guess we'll just have to make them look the other way." The first gunshot shattered the window. Glass rained across the floor. Shadow barked furiously, lunging forward as Ethan pulled Lily behind the overturned table. "They found us," Ethan said through clenched teeth. "Good," Ray said. "I've got a plan." He reached into his jacket and pulled out 2 smoke grenades. Old SWAT issue, likely stolen from the precinct armory. "We give them fog, then we move." Ethan nodded. "You take Lily, I'll draw their fire." "Like hell," Ray growled. "I'm not letting you pull a hero act." "Ray," Ethan said, locking eyes with him, "you've done enough. Get her to the ridge." There was a long pause. 2 men who had faced death too many times, both knowing one of them wasn't walking away. Finally, Ray nodded once. "All right, but you owe me a beer after this." Ethan managed a faint smile. "I'll buy you a whole damn bar." He kicked open the back door and threw the first grenade. Smoke exploded into the air, thick and gray, swirling between the trees. Gunfire erupted instantly, bullets slicing through the haze. Ethan moved through the fog like a ghost, firing in short bursts, driving the attacker's aim wild. Shadow followed at his heel, growling low, his body tense but fearless. Ray grabbed Lily's hand, leading her toward the ridge path. "Don't look back," he whispered. She nodded, clutching her stuffed bear tight. Through the smoke, Ethan saw movement, one of the men breaking formation, circling to flank Ray. Ethan fired, hitting the attacker's leg. The man fell, dropping his weapon, but another emerged behind him, taller, heavier, face obscured by a black mask. He raised his rifle. Shadow saw him first. The dog lunged, teeth sinking into the man's arm, dragging him sideways. The rifle went off, a flash of light and sound. Ethan fired once more, clean between the eyes. The man fell still. Shadow limped back, panting hard, one paw leaving a trail of red in the snow. "Hang in there, boy," Ethan whispered. "Almost there." When they reached the ridge, the sun was breaking through, pale gold spilling over the mountains. The communications tower stood ahead, old but intact, its steel frame rising above the trees. But there, waiting by the base, stood a familiar figure, Clara. She was dressed in a long gray coat, her dark hair pinned neatly, her gloved hands calm at her sides. Even in the snow, she looked immaculate, composed, untouchable. Only her eyes betrayed her, sharp, desperate, rimmed with exhaustion. "Put the gun down, Ethan," she called. "This ends now." Ethan raised his weapon. "You end it first." She smiled faintly. "You think this is still about money? It's bigger than that. You and your noble little war. You're just a piece in something larger." "Then why target Lily?" he shouted. "She's a child." Clara's expression flickered. "Because she's the only thing that still makes you hesitate." At that moment, Ray stepped forward, gun trained on her. "Step away from the tower, Clara." Clara turned her gaze on him. "You don't have the nerve." She was wrong. The shot echoed across the valley, clean, precise. Clara stumbled, her hand pressing to her chest, eyes wide in disbelief. She fell to her knees in the snow, her breath leaving in small clouds that faded as quickly as they came. Ethan lowered his gun slowly, his chest heavy with something far more complicated than victory. He approached her, crouching as she looked up at him, lips trembling. "It didn't have to end this way," he said quietly. Clara smiled weakly. "You always believed in endings, Ethan. That's your curse." Then her eyes glazed over, her body going still against the cold ground. For a long time, no one spoke. The wind moved through the pines, carrying with it the faint echo of sirens, far away, but approaching. Ray clutched his side again, his strength failing. "Upload it," he rasped. Ethan hurried to the tower, connecting the drive to the terminal. The progress bar crept upward, slow but steady. 62%, 79%, 100%. When it finished, he exhaled deeply. "It's done," he whispered. Ray collapsed to his knees, a faint smile on his face. "Good. Now they'll know everything." His eyes dimmed, his body leaning forward into the snow. Ethan caught him before he fell completely. "Ray," he murmured, his voice breaking. "Don't you dare leave now." But Ray's hand slipped from his, falling still. By the time the federal agents arrived, the smoke had cleared and the truth was free. The evidence went public within hours. Captain Brooks was arrested. Evan Morris disappeared, but was hunted down weeks later. Clara's death was ruled self-defense. Months passed. Spring returned to Silverbrook, soft and forgiving. The snow melted into rivers that carried away the scars of winter. Ethan built a new home near the edge of town, small, quiet, filled with light. Lily planted flowers in the yard, and Shadow, his fur now silvering around the muzzle, lay beside her, watching as though guarding a piece of heaven. Every evening Ethan would stand on the porch, looking out toward the hills where the old cabin once stood. The world was at peace again, but he carried the ghosts with grace, the price of survival, the proof of love. And when the wind blew through the pines, he could almost hear Maggie's calm voice, Ray's laugh, Clara's final whisper. Threads of a story that had burned through snow and fire to find its way home. In the end, this story reminds us that even in the darkest winters of our lives, God never forgets us. His miracles do not always arrive with thunder or light. They come quietly, through the courage of a father, the loyalty of a dog, and the innocent faith of a child. When love seems buried beneath the snow, His grace is already melting it from beneath. So, tonight, take a moment to thank Him for the unseen ways He protects you, for the people who stand by you when the world turns cold, and for the strength He places in your heart. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen. Comment Amen below. Subscribe for more stories of faith and hope. And may God bless you and your family today and always.